Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Naruto became the new sage of the multiverse. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The weight of the hat was a familiar comfort, a circle of crimson and white that had once been a distant, impossible dream. Now, it was just a part of him, as much as the orange jacket he had long since retired or the ache in his shoulders from a day spent hunched over documents. The afternoon sun, a generous splash of gold, poured through the large window of the Hokage's office, illuminating the lazy dance of dust motes in the air. Outside, the village of Konohagakure hummed with a vibrant, peaceful energy that was the culmination of his life's work. 15 years. It had been 15 years since the end of the Fourth Great Ninja War, since the final clash with Sasuke, since the world had teetered on the brink and been pulled back by the combined will of its children. The peace that followed was not a fragile, tentative thing. It was robust, nurtured by trade, diplomacy, and the shared memory of a horror no one wished to repeat. Technology had blossomed alongside it. Power lines crisscrossed the city like metallic vines, and the gentle rumble of the thunder rail was as common a sound as the chirping of crickets. Naruto Uzumaki, the seventh Hokage, leaned back in his chair, the wood groaning in protest. He ran a hand through his shorter, more sensible blonde hair, a wearied but deeply satisfied sigh escaping his lips. The mountain of paperwork on his desk, the infamous paperwork monster that had defeated generations of Kage more thoroughly than any enemy army, was, for the moment, slain. Budget approvals for the Academy's new virtual reality training program, a trade dispute between the Land of Waves and the Land of Tea over kelp exports, and a formal request from the Hidden Sand for joint Chunin exams. These were the battles he fought now. They were tedious, mind-numbing, and utterly, wonderfully mundane. He glanced at the picture frame on his desk. A smiling Hinata, a preteen Boruto with a rebellious smirk that was a mirror of Naruto's own youth, and a cherubic Himawari clutching a worn-out Shikaka plushie. His heart swelled with a warmth that no amount of sage energy or Kurama's chakra could replicate. This was the prize. This was what it had all been for. A soft knock came from the door. "Come in." Shikamaru Nara entered, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, his usual expression of profound laziness masking a mind that was anything but. "Finished for the day, Naruto?" "Just about," Naruto said, stretching his arms above his head with a series of pops and cracks. "Anything urgent?" "The Kumo delegation is complaining about the hotel's water pressure." "Troublesome, but not a national security threat," Shikamaru drawled, leaning against the doorframe. "I've also got a clone of yours in my office arguing about the strategic value of funding a competitive eating tournament during the Founders' Festival." Naruto grinned. "He makes a good point. It's good for morale. And good for Ichiraku's." "Of course he does. He's you," Shikamaru sighed, a faint smile touching his lips. "Speaking of which, how many have you got out there today?" "Let's see, one is helping Boruto with his chakra control exercises. He's getting good, but his focus wavers." Naruto's voice was laced with fatherly pride. "Another is at home, helping Hinata with dinner. Hima wanted to make tomato ramen from scratch." He paused, a flicker of something distant in his eyes. "And one is sitting with Kakashi-sensei at the memorial stone." Shikamaru's gaze softened. Some duties were too important, too personal, to be forgotten, even amidst the peace. "You're spread thin, Naruto." "It's the only way to be everywhere I need to be," Naruto replied, his smile returning, though it didn't quite reach his eyes this time. "Hokage, father, husband, friend. I can't choose." "You don't have to. You've earned this," Shikamaru said, his voice unusually sincere. "You actually did it, you idiot. You brought peace." He pushed off the doorframe. "Go home to the real ones. I'll handle the Kumo's plumbing crisis." "Thanks, Shikamaru. What would I do without you?" "Probably declare war over a bad batch of ramen." "Go on." With a nod, Naruto performed the familiar hand seal. Across the village, 3 distinct puffs of smoke signaled the dispersal of his clones. The influx of their memories was a familiar jolt, the frustration and eventual breakthrough of Boruto nailing the tree-walking exercise, the delightful mess of flour and tomato juice in his own kitchen, the quiet, shared silence with his old teacher. He gathered his cloak, feeling the deep-seated exhaustion of a long day finally settle into his bones. But instead of heading home, he found his feet carrying him in a different direction. The setting sun cast long shadows as he walked through the village, exchanging waves and greetings with vendors closing their shops and children chasing each other through the streets. His path led him upward, toward the great stone faces carved into the mountain overlooking the village. His face. He sat cross-legged on the carved head of his father, Minato, the fourth Hokage. From here, Konoha was a tapestry of twinkling lights and warm, inviting homes. The air was cool, carrying the scent of pine from the surrounding forests and the distant aroma of grilled meat from the Akimichi clan's barbecue restaurant. This was his ritual. A few moments of silent reflection, a chance to connect with the legacy he was now a part of, to feel the pulse of the village he loved more than life itself. He closed his eyes, sinking into a light meditative state, letting the day's stress melt away. He focused on his own chakra, the vast, sunbright sea within him, intertwined with Kurama's formidable, volcanic power. The nine-tailed fox was mostly quiet these days, a grumpy but ultimately content companion in the back of his mind, their bond forged in battle and tempered by mutual respect. Naruto focused on the life energy of the village, the thousands of individual flames of chakra burning below. He could feel their joys, their worries, their dreams. It was a symphony of life, and he was its conductor. It was in that moment of perfect, serene connection that the world was torn away from him. It wasn't a sound or a light. It was a pull. A violent, metaphysical wrenching, as if a cosmic hand had reached into his soul and yanked. His physical senses vanished. The feeling of the cool stone beneath him, the scent of pine, the gentle breeze, all gone. He was adrift in a place that had no up or down, no light or dark. It was a silent, non-space, a void of pure potential. Panic, cold and sharp, tried to claw its way up his throat, but he couldn't even feel his own body. Kurama? He projected into the void, a thought more than a word. The only reply was a distant, muffled roar, as if his partner was on the other side of 1,000 thick walls. He was alone. Then, a form began to coalesce before him. It was like watching a watercolor painting bleed into existence on damp paper. Faint lines of light, ghostly and translucent, wove themselves into the shape of a man. He was ancient, robed, with Rinnegan eyes that seemed to contain galaxies, and two horn-like protrusions on his forehead. Hagoromo Otsutsuki. Naruto breathed, the name a thought form in the non-space. The sage of six paths looked at him, but his form was distressingly weak. He was flickering, insubstantial, like a memory on the verge of being forgotten. The last time they had met, the sage had been an entity of immense, overwhelming power. Now, he looked like an echo. Naruto Uzumaki. Hagoromo's voice was not a sound, but a direct impression on Naruto's consciousness. It was thin, strained, and filled with an ancient weariness that went beyond time itself. I am glad I was able to reach you. My time is at an end. Naruto's immediate instinct, the one that had defined his entire life, was to help. He tried to push his own vibrant chakra toward the fading spirit, a torrent of golden energy meant to reinforce, to heal. What's wrong? Let me help you. The sage raised a translucent hand, and Naruto's energy dissipated harmlessly against an unseen barrier. Your power cannot mend what is simply finished, child. My existence is bound to the very fabric of this reality, what my ancestors called the axis mundi. I am the linchpin, the central pillar that gives this universe its narrative cohesion, and that pillar is crumbling. The words made little sense, but the feeling behind them was one of absolute, terrifying finality. Crumbling? What are you talking about? The world is at peace. We did it! We won! Naruto protested, his confusion mounting. You won a war, Naruto. You brought peace to your world, Hagoromo corrected, his form flickering more violently, like a dying candle. But your world is but a single leaf on a single branch of an infinite tree. And the tree itself is dying. The sage's Rinnegan eyes seemed to draw Naruto in, and for a horrifying second, Naruto's perception expanded. He saw it. Not with his eyes, but with his soul. He saw a vast, impossibly complex web of shimmering light. It was a tapestry of threads, each one glowing with its own unique color, and intensity. He instinctively understood that each thread was a universe, a complete and separate reality. He saw threads that were brilliant and strong, and others that were dim and weak. And then he saw the darkness. It wasn't a presence, it was an absence. A creeping, eating nothingness that moved at the edges of the web. He saw a thread of reality, vibrant, full of light and life, touch the edge of this void. It didn't explode. It didn't scream. It simply ceased. It was unwritten from existence, the light of its billions of souls extinguished in an instant, leaving behind not even a memory, just a raw, gaping hole in the tapestry. Naruto felt a psychic scream of such magnitude that it almost shattered his consciousness, the echo of a trillion lives being erased at once. He was violently pulled back to the side of Hagoromo, his mind reeling from the sheer horror of what he'd witnessed. That, Hagoromo's thought voice was grim, is the great unraveling. An entity, a force, that I can only describe as a hunger in the void. It does not conquer or destroy. It erases. It consumes realities, wiping them from the ledger of what is, was, and ever will be. For eons since my ascension, I have used my power, my very essence, to form a ward around our corner of existence, a shield to keep that silent hunger at bay. But my essence is spent. The shield is cracking. Soon it will shatter, and our reality, your world, your family, your hard-won peace, will be next. Naruto's mind, a mind that had comprehended world-ending jutsus and ten-tailed beasts, could barely process the scale of this. This wasn't a war. This wasn't an enemy to be punched or reasoned with. It was a fundamental law of cosmic predation. No, he whispered, the thought filled with dawning dread. There has to be something we can do. You're the sage of six paths. You can't just fade away. Everything ends, Naruto. Even gods. Even stories, Hagoromo said, his form becoming so transparent that Naruto could see the stardusted void through him. But a story can have a new author. A legacy can be passed on. The role of guardian must be filled. The old sage's gaze locked onto him, and in that moment, Naruto felt the full weight of the god's millennia of lonely vigilance. The child of prophecy, the one who saved his world not through power, but through connection. The reincarnation of my son Azura, who proved that love is a greater force than hatred. The one who taught a beast of pure malice how to be a friend. There is no one else. There has never been anyone else. Hagoromo's voice grew stronger, filled with a desperate, final purpose. I cannot ask this of you, Naruto Uzumaki. It is a burden no single soul was ever meant to bear. But I must. I choose you to be my successor. Not as the sage of a single world, but as the new Nexus sage. The guardian of the multiverse. Naruto was stunned into silence. Him? Guardian of the multiverse? The words were absurd. They were an astronomical weight he couldn't even begin to fathom. No, Naruto finally managed, his thought voice shaking. No, I can't. I won't. My place is in Konoha. My duty is to my village. My family. Hinata, Boruto, Himawari, they need me. I'm the Hokage. I deal with trade disputes and plumbing, not erasing universes. His panic was real, his refusal absolute. I'm just a man. I just want to protect my home. That's all I ever wanted. He had fought his whole life for this peace, for this small, precious corner of happiness. The idea of trading it for an eternal, lonely watch against an incomprehensible cosmic horror was a violation of everything he had earned. A deep, profound sadness emanated from Hagoromo. I know. That is why you are the only one who is worthy. You do not seek this power. You would refuse it. That is the ultimate proof that you are the one who can be trusted with it. The sage's form began to dissolve rapidly now, breaking apart into motes of pure white light. A choice is a luxury we no longer have. The unraveling is coming. The ward is broken. Before Naruto could protest further, Hagoromo's hands, now made of starlight, shot forward and pressed against his chest. I offer you my remaining power, my knowledge, my sight, and my burden, the sage declared, his voice booming with the last of his cosmic authority. Become the Nexus. Become the shield. Hold the line, Naruto Uzumaki. It was not a transference. It was an apocalypse. A supernova of pure energy erupted from Hagoromo's form and poured into Naruto. It was not chakra. It was something older, more fundamental. It was the raw code of reality, the knowledge of a billion lifetimes, the sight of infinity. It was a tidal wave of information and power that threatened to shred his very soul. He felt his mind being ripped open, stretched to encompass concepts he had no words for. He saw the birth of his own universe, a silent explosion of rules and potential. He saw the Otsutsuki clan, celestial parasites drifting from world to world. He saw timelines branch and diverge, creating infinite variations of his own life. A world where his parents lived and he was a happy, unremarkable child. A world where Obito never fell to darkness. A grim, shadowed reality where Madara had won and the world slept in a dream death. A horrifying, sterile world where Kaguya had turned humanity into an army of white Setsu to fight a threat even she feared. The pain was absolute. It was the pain of a mortal mind being forcibly rewritten into something divine. He felt Kurama roaring in agony and terror within him, the beast's own immense being dwarfed by the cosmic flood. He was drowning in an ocean of existence. As Hagoromo's last mote of light flowed into him, a final, sorrowful whisper echoed in the depths of his being, a ghost of a thought that would haunt him forever. Forgive me, and do not lose yourself. Then, just as violently as he was pulled out, he was slammed back in. Naruto's eyes snapped open. He was on his back, on the cold stone of the Hokage monument. A strangled gasp tore from his lungs, his body convulsing. The sky above was a dizzying swirl of deep indigo, and the first pinpricks of evening stars. The air was cold against his sweat-drenched skin. He pushed himself up onto his elbows, his head throbbing with a migraine of celestial proportions. His stomach churned, and he retched, though nothing came up. Naruto! What in all the hells was that? Kurama's voice was a bellow of fury and fear inside his head, a familiar anchor in a sea of madness. Your chakra network, it's been reforged. It's infinite. What did he do to you? Naruto couldn't answer. He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to block out the pounding in his skull, but it was a mistake. In the darkness behind his eyelids, he didn't see the familiar reddish-orange of Kurama's chakra or the afterimage of the evening sky. He saw the web. It was no longer a fleeting vision. It was there, a permanent fixture of his new senses. A glorious, terrifying, an infinite tapestry of light spreading in every direction. The multiverse. It was beautiful, a lattice of creation that pulsed with life and story. He could feel it. He could feel the trillions upon trillions of souls living and dying across countless worlds. He felt the joy of a new parent in a world made of crystal, the terror of a soldier in a war fought with magic and steel, the quiet contemplation of a philosopher on a planet with 3 suns. It was a deafening, crushing symphony of all existence, and it was flowing directly into his mind, and he could see the holes. The patches of silent, dead, absolute nothingness where the unraveling had been. He felt a new flicker at the edge of his perception, another thread, another universe, winking out of existence. Another psychic death scream, fainter this time, but just as horrifying, echoed in the abyss. He clutched his head, a raw, guttural cry of pure agony tearing from his throat, a sound that was half human, half something else entirely. It was the sound of a simple man, a father and a leader, realizing that his world had just become infinitely large, and that he was now its only guardian. The contentment he had felt just minutes ago, the simple, earned peace of the 7th Hokage, was a distant memory, a life that belonged to someone else. That man was gone. In his place was a being trembling on the precipice of godhood, staring into an abyss that was staring back. He was Naruto Uzumaki. And he was utterly, cosmically alone. The journey from the Hokage monument to his own front door was the longest, most arduous trek of Naruto Uzumaki's life. It was a distance of perhaps a single kilometer, a path he had walked thousands of times without a second thought. Now, every step was a battle against the crushing gravity of 1,000 other worlds. He stumbled down the stone steps from the mountain, his hand braced against the rough-hewn rock face. The granite felt wrong. It was cold and solid under his palm, but his new senses screamed at him with a deluge of conflicting information. He felt the porous sandstone of a desert monument in a world scorched by twin suns, the slick, moss-covered obsidian of a sacrificial altar in a realm of perpetual twilight, and the smooth, warm marble of a statue dedicated to a hero he'd never known. His own hand felt both calloused and scarred, and simultaneously ethereal, a construct of light in a dimension of pure thought. He was a focal point of infinite sensations, and his mind was the overwhelmed nexus. Focus, Kit! Kurama's roar was a lifeline in the chaotic sea. The fox's chakra, once a well of volatile rage, was now a familiar, grounding presence. It was a searing furnace of power at the core of his being, a gravity well of selfhood that the tidal wave of multiversal input could not wash away. Focus on me. On my chakra. Feel its burn, its weight. Latch onto it. Let the rest of it be noise. Naruto did as he was told, gasping for breath he didn't realize he was holding. He focused every ounce of his will on the sensation of Kurama within him. It was like finding a single, blaring trumpet in an orchestra of a billion screaming instruments. It hurt, but it was singular. It was his. Slowly, painstakingly, the cacophony of a million other worlds receded. It didn't vanish, but it became a background hum, a static hissing at the edge of his perception instead of a deafening roar at its center. He took a breath. The air smelled of Konoha's pine and evening dew. Another breath. He tasted the dust on his tongue. He could walk. He straightened up, his body trembling with the strain of a battle no one could see. He looked at his hands. They were just his hands again, scarred and strong. The Hokage of Konohagakure. He had to be. The walk through the village was a new kind of torture. He kept his head down, his gaze fixed on the paved stones before him. He could hear the laughter of children playing, but layered beneath it was the sound of a desperate chase through a futuristic, rain-slicked metropolis. He saw the warm, inviting light spilling from the window of a dango shop, but superimposed over it was the cold, blue light of a dying star. A couple walked past, their hands clasped, and for a gut-wrenching moment, he felt the searing agony of their alternate selves in another universe being torn apart by war. He felt a primal, desperate urge to just scream, to fall to his knees and claw at his own eyes and ears until the input stopped. But he couldn't. He was the Hokage. He was a father. He had to go home. He had to pretend that his soul hadn't just been unmade and reforged into a cosmic listening post. When he finally reached his front door, he paused for a full minute, his hand hovering over the handle. He was terrified of what he might see, what he might feel. He was terrified of looking at his wife and his children, and seeing not just them, but all their infinite variations, all their potential joys and sorrows across 1,000 different lives. Taking one last, shuddering breath, he pushed the door open. "I'm home," he called out, his voice hoarse. The scent of his own kitchen, tomato, broth, grilled pork, assaulted him, and it was the most blessedly singular sensation he'd experienced since his awakening. It was real. It was his. "Welcome home, dear." Hinata's gentle voice came from the dining room. "You're late. Is everything all right?" He rounded the corner and saw them. His family, sitting at the dinner table. Hinata, her dark hair framing her face, looked at him with an expression of soft concern. Himawari was eagerly arranging chopsticks, her face smudged with flour. Boruto was slouched in his chair, poking at a slice of narutomaki in his bowl with a look of adolescent boredom. But his eyes lit up for a fraction of a second when he saw his father. For a moment, all Naruto could see was them. His anchor. His reality. Then, the static returned. As he looked at Hinata, his vision flickered. He saw her in the pristine white robes of the Hyuga clan head, her expression stern and remote. He saw her as a lonely old woman, clutching a picture of a family she never had. He saw her dying in his arms during the fight with pain, a vision that still haunted his nightmares, now playing out with visceral, real-time clarity. He looked at Boruto, and saw a flash of a blonde-haired ninja with a deep scar over his eye, a cold-looking blade in his hand, standing amidst the ruins of Konoha. He saw another version, a simple shopkeeper with no knowledge of chakra. He looked at Himawari and saw a joyful young girl, and then, in a horrifying split second, a tombstone bearing her name. "Dad? You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost," Boruto said, snapping Naruto out of his fugue. Naruto forced a smile, a painful stretching of muscles that felt alien to his face. Sorry. Just a long day. The paperwork monster was in rare form. He sat down, the wooden chair feeling both solid and like a collection of agitated atoms. Hinata placed a steaming bowl of ramen in front of him. His favorite. Tomato ramen, just as Hima had wanted. He looked at the rich red broth, the perfectly cooked noodles, the vibrant green of the scallions. It was a masterpiece of love. He picked up his chopsticks, the simple act requiring an immense amount of concentration. He brought the noodles to his lips. He tasted the familiar, comforting flavor of home, but it was immediately corrupted. It was mingled with the taste of ash from a burning world, the cloying sweetness of an alien fruit, the metallic tang of blood from a battle happening a million realities away. He choked, a cough racking his body as he tried to swallow the discordant mouthful. Naruto! Hinata was by his side in an instant, her hand on his back. Are you all right? Are you getting sick? Her touch was both a comfort and a new form of agony. Through their physical contact, his senses flared. He felt her unwavering love for him, a beacon of pure light. But he also felt the echoes of other Hinatas, the shy academy girl's nervous heartbeat, the fierce warrior's determination, the grieving widow's bottomless sorrow. I'm fine, he rasped, pushing his bowl away slightly. Just really tired. Maybe I overdid it with the clones today. It was the lamest excuse he could think of, but it was all he had. He couldn't eat. He couldn't sit there and pretend. The weight of infinity was crushing him, making a mockery of this simple, perfect family dinner. He was a ghost at his own table. He was physically present, but his consciousness was being scattered across all of creation. He could hear his daughter telling him about a drawing she made, but her voice was a tiny whisper in a hurricane of cosmic noise. I think I just need to lie down for a bit, he said, his voice strained. I've got a killer headache. The disappointment on Himawari's face was a physical blow. But you haven't even tried my ramen, Daddy. Guilt, sharp and piercing, cut through the psychic static. He forced himself to take one more bite, to smile, to tell her it was the best he'd ever had. The lie tasted like acid. It's delicious, sweetie. The best. I just need to get some reports done in the study. I'll be back out later, he mumbled, standing up on shaky legs. Hinata's Byakugan couldn't see the state of his soul, but her heart could. She saw the deep, hunted look in his eyes, the unnatural tension in his shoulders. She didn't press him, but her concern followed him like a shadow as he retreated from the warm light of the dining room into the quiet solitude of his study. He shut the door, leaning his forehead against the cool wood, his knuckles white as he gripped the doorknob. He was failing. His first day as the Nexus Sage, and he was already failing at being a father and a husband. Hagoromo's final words echoed in his mind, and do not lose yourself. He was already losing himself. He was dissolving. This is untenable, Kurama growled, his voice a low rumble in Naruto's mind. You cannot live like this. You will go mad. That old ghost gave you the power of a god but left you with the mind of a man to process it. It's a cruel gift. I have to control it, Naruto thought, his desperation hardening into resolve. I have to. There has to be a way to build a wall. To filter it. He sat down at his desk, but didn't look at the scrolls and books. He closed his eyes, bracing for the onslaught. He sank into his own mind, past the surface-level thoughts, to the vast inner sea of his chakra. There, he saw it clearly now, his own brilliant, sun-like chakra, and Kurama's crimson, volcanic power, intertwined, and flowing into both, from everywhere and nowhere, were the shimmering, gossamer threads of the multiverse. He tried to push them away, to erect a wall of pure chakra, but it was like trying to build a dam against the ocean with a handful of sand. The threads simply passed through it, their information pouring into him unabated. Frustration mounted. He was the most powerful ninja in the world, a master of Sage Mode and the Nine-Tails power. He could create Razengans the size of meteors, and he couldn't perform a simple act of mental self-defense. An idea, born of desperation, sparked in his mind. If he couldn't block the input, maybe he could control the output. Maybe he could learn to navigate it. He let the sensory wall crumble, and the roar returned. He didn't fight it. He let it wash over him, and instead of focusing on his own world, he cast out a thought, a question, a desire, like a fishing line into the cosmic ocean. It was a thought he had suppressed for years, a painful what if that was too tender to touch, what if Pervy Sage hadn't died. The moment the thought formed, amplified by the near omnipotence humming in his veins, one of the countless threads of light in the web flared with recognition. It pulsed, brighter than the others, calling to him. He focused on it, pulling on it with his will. The world of his study dissolved. The wooden desk, the scrolls, the scent of old paper, it all faded into a blur of colorless light, like a television losing its signal. There was no sense of movement, no feeling of wind or speed. It was a transition of pure perception. One moment he was in his study, the next the light coalesced, the sound sharpened, and a new reality painted itself into existence around him. He was standing in the shadows of an alleyway. The air was thick with the smell of cheap sake, grilled squid, and a woman's cloying perfume. It was a familiar, rowdy nightlife district, but not in Konoha. He recognized it as a town in the land of hot water. He heard a boisterous, familiar laugh that made his heart stop. He peered out of the alley. There, at a small, open-air bar, sat two figures. One was a blonde woman, undeniably Tsunade, looking a few years older than his own world's version, but with a genuine, happy smile on her face. And beside her, his arms slung casually around her shoulder, was Jiraiya. He was alive. His hair was still a wild white mane, the red lines on his face were a little deeper, and his eyes crinkled with more laugh lines than Naruto remembered. He was holding a sake cup in one hand, gesturing wildly with the other, as he told some outrageous story that had Tsunade rolling her eyes and laughing at the same time. Naruto's breath hitched. A profound, aching sense of loss, so sharp and immediate it felt like a physical wound, tore through him. It was him. It was real. This wasn't an illusion. It was a genuine, living, breathing world where his master, his godfather, had survived his fated encounter in the Rain Village. And then the kid, you should have seen him, Haim. He stands up in front of all the Kage, covered in dirt, and tells them he's gonna handle it. Jiraiya was saying, his voice thick with pride. Never seen anything like it. My student, the 7th Hokage. Makes all the peeping worth it, I tell ya. Tsunade playfully smacked his arm. Don't get sentimental, you old fool. You'd think you were his father. Jiraiya's boisterous demeanor softened. He looked down into his sake cup, a wistful, gentle smile on his face. Sometimes, feels like it. Naruto clapped a hand over his own mouth to stifle a sob. The sound was trapped in his throat, a knot of pure, unadulterated grief and longing. This was it. A world where he had his master to see him become Hokage. A world where Jiraiya got to be happy, to be with the woman he'd always loved. A world that was, in this one small, crucial way, better than his own. The temptation was a seductive, venomous whisper in his soul. I could stay. The thought was so powerful, so alluring, it felt like a physical pull. I could just step out of this alley. I could talk to him. I'm Naruto Uzumaki. He would know me. I could live here. I could have him back. What was his other life, with its crushing divine burden, compared to this? He could have his master back. He could have a piece of his broken past healed. But then, the images from his new senses, the ones he had been trying so hard to block, came to his aid. He saw his Hinata's worried face. He saw Himawari's hopeful smile, even after he had disappointed her. He saw Boruto's feigned indifference hiding a desperate need for his father's attention. He saw the crimson hat on his desk. He saw the faces of every man, woman, and child in Konoha who depended on him. They were his. That pain, that life, that imperfect, messy, beautiful reality was his. This was someone else's happy ending. To take it would be the ultimate betrayal of his own. With a wrenching effort of will that felt like tearing off a part of his own soul, he pulled back. He let go of the shimmering thread. The world of the bar, of Tsunade's laughter and Jiraiya's living presence, dissolved back into the blinding, colorless light. A moment later, he was back in his study, collapsing onto his knees, gasping as if he had just surfaced from a deep dive. The tears he had been holding back now flowed freely, silent tracks down his cheeks. The loss felt as fresh and raw as it had the day he first heard the news. He had touched paradise and had been forced to reject it. This was the nature of his new power, not just a burden of vigilance, but a burden of infinite temptation, a constant reminder of every path not taken, every happiness he could have had. He didn't know how long he knelt there, lost in his grief, but the sudden, sharp scent of ozone and a displacement of the air snapped him back to the present. He looked up, his tear-filled eyes widening. A swirling, black and purple vortex had opened in the middle of his study. It was a distortion of space itself, a technique only one person in the world could perform. A figure stepped out of it, and the portal snapped shut behind him. He was tall and dressed in a dark traveling cloak, his face framed by black hair that covered one of his eyes. His single visible eye, a deep, piercing onyx, was fixed on Naruto. The other, hidden behind his bangs, Naruto knew, held the celestial pattern of the Rinnegan. "Sasuke," Naruto breathed, his voice cracking. Sasuke Uchiha's face was an unreadable mask, but his presence was electric, a razor's edge of contained power. He surveyed the room, his gaze lingering on Naruto's kneeling, disheveled form. "I was in the land of iron," Sasuke said, his voice a low, even baritone that cut through the lingering static in Naruto's head. "I felt it from there. A tremor in reality. It felt like your chakra." But wrong. It was screaming. Of course Sasuke would be the one to notice. His Rinnegan didn't just see chakra. It perceived the very structure of space-time, the flow of energy between dimensions. Kagaya's worlds had taught him that. To him, Naruto's sudden transformation must have felt like a star suddenly going supernova in the heart of their reality. "What happened to you, Naruto?" Sasuke's tone wasn't accusatory. It was a cold, pragmatic demand for information. He was a man who eliminated threats, and he needed to know if his oldest friend had just become one. Naruto pushed himself to his feet, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. He felt a hysterical laugh bubble up in his chest. Of all people, the one person he had spent half his life chasing, fighting, and trying to understand was now the only one who might have a sliver of a chance of comprehending the insanity that had befallen him. "You're not going to believe me," Naruto said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "Try me," Sasuke replied, his gaze unwavering. And so, Naruto told him. He told him everything. The words tumbled out, disjointed and frantic at first, then settling into a narrative of pure, cosmic dread. He spoke of his meditation on the monument, the sudden pull from his body, the fading spirit of Hagoromo Otsutsuki. He described the vision of the multiverse as a web of light, and the horrifying, silent nothingness of the great unraveling that consumed realities. He explained the sage's final choice, the forced transference of power, and the unbearable burden that came with it. "He called me the Nexus Sage," Naruto finished, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "He made me the guardian of everything. And I can't even eat dinner with my own family, Sasuke. I close my eyes and I see a billion worlds. I hear them all. I feel them all. It's too much." He gestured weakly to the spot where he had knelt moments before. I just saw him. Jiraiya-sensei. Alive. Happy. In another world. And I couldn't. I had to come back." He finally looked at Sasuke, fully expecting to see disbelief, suspicion, or even pity. Instead, he saw something far more terrifying, a dawning, grim understanding. Sasuke's visible eye was wide, his usual stoicism replaced by a look of profound shock and concentration. He was processing it. The man who had traveled through Kagaya's dimensions, who wielded the Sage of Six Paths' visual prowess, was connecting the dots. Sasuke was silent for a long time, the only sound in the room Naruto's ragged breathing. Finally, he spoke, his voice quiet but carrying an immense weight. "Hagoromo. I felt his spirit fade from the world after the war, but I always assumed he was just watching from a distance. To think he was an actual barrier." He took a step closer, and for the first time, Naruto saw a flicker of empathy in his friend's eye. The burden of a god, given to an idiot. The insult was so characteristically Sasuke that it almost made Naruto smile. It was the most grounding thing he'd heard all night. "This unraveling," Sasuke continued, his mind clearly working, analyzing the problem from a strategic standpoint. You can sense it? Naruto nodded numbly. It's like holes. Blank spots? I can feel when a new one appears. It feels like a scream that no one can hear. Sasuke's expression hardened. This was a threat, and Sasuke Uchiha understood threats. You're adrift, Naruto. Your consciousness is a ship without a rudder in an infinite ocean. You can't chart the entire ocean at once. You need an anchor. He gestured around the study. Hagoromo gave you the sight of a god, but you are still here. Your body, your chakra, is still tethered to this specific point in all of existence. This is your anchor. Sasuke stepped forward, his presence sharp and focused. You're trying to block it all out. That's a losing battle. You can't dam the ocean. You need to learn to navigate it. You need to build a lighthouse. He pointed a finger at Naruto's chest. Your center is here. Your home. Your family. This village. This is the only reality that matters. The rest is just noise. You have to choose for it to be noise. How? Naruto asked, his voice desperate. How do I choose? With will, Sasuke stated simply. The same will that let you master Sage Mode. The same will that let you tame the Nine Tails. Your power has always responded to your will. This is no different, just bigger. Stop being a passive receiver. Become an active filter. When you look at Hinata, decide to see only your Hinata. When you listen to your daughter, choose to hear only her voice. Use this new power to focus, not to wander. Sasuke reached out and placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder. His grip was firm, grounding. Build a wall in your mind. Not a dam to block the ocean, but a fortress. And in that fortress you place your world. You place Konoha. You place your family. Everything outside the wall is secondary. You can look over the wall when you need to, when you sense a threat. But you must always have the fortress to return to. It's your sanity. The words, so simple, so practical, clicked in Naruto's mind. He wasn't a victim of this power. He was its master. Or he had to be. He had to impose his own will on infinity. Following Sasuke's lead, Naruto closed his eyes again. He braced for the roar, but this time, he met it with a purpose. He found his anchor, the warm, solid presence of Kurama, the lingering touch of Sasuke's hand on his shoulder, the phantom taste of Hima's tomato ramen. He pictured his fortress, a mental construct built of his love for his village, mortared with his devotion to his family. He visualized the great walls rising, not to block the shimmering threads, but to define a space, a sanctuary for his own reality. Slowly, miraculously it began to work. The roar of the multiverse subsided. It was still there, a low hum beyond his new mental walls, but it was manageable. The phantom sensations faded, the conflicting sights vanished. For the first time since Hagoromo's gift, Naruto felt a fragile, tentative peace. He opened his eyes and looked at Sasuke. The exhaustion was still there, etched into every line on his face, but the hunted, desperate look was gone, replaced by a familiar, steely resolve. Thank you, Sasuke, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Sasuke simply nodded, removing his hand. This changes things. My mission to watch for Otsutsuki remnants has just become insufficient. He looked at Naruto, his Rinnegan seeming to pierce through to the new, vast power within him. You are not alone in this, Naruto. You are the shield, the nexus. Then I will be the sword that strikes from the shadows. Whatever this unraveling is, we will face it. For the second time that night, Naruto felt the sting of tears, but these were not of grief or despair. They were of relief. He had been given the loneliest burden in all of existence, but he would not have to bear it completely alone. The weight of infinity was still on his shoulders, a crushing, eternal mantle. But now, at least, he had found his footing. He was the Hokage. He was a father. And he was the Nexus Sage, and for the first time, he felt he might just survive being all three. The days that followed were a precarious balancing act on the edge of a razor. Naruto learned to live inside the fortress of his own mind, the mental sanctuary Sasuke had helped him conceptualize. It was a constant, conscious effort. He had to perpetually will his reality into focus, treating his own world as the signal and the clamor of the multiverse as background static. He sat in the Hokage office, the morning light cutting across his desk, and forced himself to focus on the grain of the wood, the weight of the pen in his hand, the distinct, slightly floral scent of the ink. Shikamaru was across from him, outlining a complex new water-sharing treaty with the hidden sand. So if we redirect from the Naka River tributary during their dry season, our agricultural output will dip by an estimated 4%, but it's a necessary gesture of goodwill, Shikamaru explained, pointing to a map. Gaara's council is being troublesome about the transport logistics, but Naruto nodded, his eyes on the map, but his mind was on the wall. He could feel the hum of infinity just beyond it. The low, thrumming vibration of a trillion lives. It was no longer a deafening roar, but a constant, low-grade pressure against his consciousness, a reminder of the abyss he was now charged to watch. He had learned to selectively lower the defenses, to listen in with purpose. He could focus his intent and perceive specific types of realities. Worlds at war, worlds at peace, worlds where science had far outstripped ninjutsu. It was a skill he practiced in the dead of night, when his family was asleep and the village was quiet, honing his control over the godlike senses that had been thrust upon him. Naruto? Are you listening? Shikamaru's voice cut through his concentration. You have that look again. Like you're 1,000 miles away. Naruto blinked, snapping back to the present with a jolt. Sorry, Shikamaru. 4%. That's acceptable. Draft the proposal? I trust your judgment. Shikamaru sighed, gathering his papers. You've been different since that night Sasuke showed up. Quieter. You're physically here, but it feels like part of you is somewhere else. If you're in some kind of trouble, Naruto, you know you don't have to face it alone. The genuine concern in his friend's voice was a comforting warmth, but also a painful reminder of his isolation. How could he explain? Hey Shikamaru, I'm actually the new guardian of all existence, and I'm trying to keep a cosmic entity of pure nothingness from erasing our reality. Now, about that water treaty. The thought was so absurd it was almost funny. I know, Naruto said, forcing a reassuring smile. Just a lot on my mind. The Hokage's burden, you know? It was a half-truth. He bore the Hokage's burden, but it was now a single grain of sand on a beach of infinite responsibility. As Shikamaru left, Naruto leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes for a moment. He allowed the walls of his fortress to become slightly more permeable, letting the symphony of the multiverse wash over him. He was getting better at this, at navigating the endless sea. He could feel the threads of existence, vibrant and alive. The joy of a child taking its first steps in one world, the grim determination of a rebellion in another. It was overwhelming, but no longer agonizing. He was the watcher on the wall, and for now, the wall was holding. And then it happened. It wasn't a sound. It was a severance. In the vast, interconnected web of his perception, a single, brilliant thread of light, a universe teeming with life, was touched by the creeping, silent darkness he had been shown. There was a sudden, violent jerk, a psychic torsion that ripped through Naruto's consciousness. It felt as though a vital nerve in his own spiritual body had been located, seized, and brutally torn out. A raw, silent scream of pure agony echoed in his mind, a chorus of billions of voices silenced in a single, horrifying instant. The sensation was so violating, so fundamentally wrong, that his body reacted without his consent. He gasped, a sharp, choke sound, and his vision went white. The pressure in his skull became unbearable, a spike of pure pain that radiated from the base of his neck to the crown of his head. The pen dropped from his numb fingers, clattering onto the desk. He shoved himself away from the desk, his chair tipping over and crashing to the floor as he collapsed, clutching his head. Naruto! What is it? Kurama's voice was a panicked roar inside him, the fox feeling the backlash through their shared soul. It's like a piece of you was just amputated. It happened again, Naruto groaned, his face pressed against the cool wooden floorboards. The pain was receding, leaving behind a phantom ache, a void in his senses where a universe used to be. The psychic echo of its death was a sickening, hollow feeling that made him want to vomit. A world, it's gone. Just gone. He lay there for a moment, the world of his office slowly coming back into focus. The smell of ink and old paper. The sight of his overturned chair. The mundane reality of it all felt like a cruel joke compared to the cosmic genocide he had just witnessed. This couldn't be his life. He couldn't just sit here, in his comfortable office, and feel entire worlds die. He couldn't just be a passive sensor for annihilation. Hagoromo had made him the shield. A shield that feels every blow but does nothing is not a shield. It's just a witness. A cold fire, born of horror and his own innate, stubborn refusal to accept defeat, began to burn in his gut. He would not just sit and watch. He couldn't. "I'm going," he whispered, the words a promise to himself. "Going where?" Kurama demanded, a note of caution in his tone. "You barely have control over these senses, let alone the power to travel. You saw a version of Jiraiya by accident. This is different. You're talking about willingly throwing yourself into that." "I have to see it," Naruto said, pushing himself onto his hands and knees. His whole body trembled, not from weakness, but from a surfeit of furious energy. "I have to know what we're up against. I can't fight a ghost. I can't fight a bad feeling. I need to see the wound." He stood up, his eyes blazing with a dangerous light. He ignored the mess in his office, the work on his desk, the life he was supposed to be living. He focused inward, on the severed thread, the raw, open wound in the fabric of existence. He could still feel its location, a point of sickening emptiness in the grand tapestry. He reached for it, not with his hands but with his will. He poured his new, immense power into the desire to be there. He wasn't thinking about hand seals or jutsu. This was more primal. He was the nexus, and he was commanding reality to bend. The air in front of him began to shimmer, not like a heat haze, but like a glitch in the world. The space between atoms seemed to stretch and groan. A sound like tearing fabric filled the room, and a fissure of pure, chaotic energy appeared before him. It wasn't the clean, swirling vortex of Sasuke's Rinnegan. This was a raw, violent tear in the skin of the universe, a jagged wound of light and color that churned with untamed power. Through it, he saw not another place, but an unnerving, profound nothing. "Naruto, stop! This is reckless!" Kurama yelled, but Naruto's resolve was absolute. He had to know. With a deep breath and a silent apology to the family he might not come back to, he stepped through the rift. The transition was nauseating. It was like being turned inside out and squeezed through the eye of a needle. All of his senses were scrambled, replaced by a feeling of utter disassembly. For a terrifying moment, he was nothing but disconnected thoughts and stray energy, and then, with a jarring lurch, he was reassembled. He stumbled forward, falling to his knees on ground that felt both solid and strangely ephemeral, like packed ash. He took a gasping breath, but the air had no taste, no temperature. It was just there, a thin, sterile medium. When he finally looked up, the sight stole the breath from his lungs. He was in a city. Or what was left of one. Towering skyscrapers, elegant and futuristic in their design, pierced the sky that was a fractured canvas of wrongness. Great, geometric chunks of the sky were simply gone, replaced by a non-color, a patch of absolute black that didn't reflect or emit light. It was the color of a computer screen that had been turned off. Through these holes he saw not stars or space, but the very texture of the void. The edges of the remaining sky flickered, as if the world were a film strip catching in a projector, threatening to burn through at any moment. The city itself was caught in a state of silent, slow-motion decay. A massive suspension bridge in the distance wasn't crumbling into rubble. Its far end was simply fraying into nothingness, its steel girders and cables dissolving into motes of gray dust that then vanished. A nearby building had a perfect, spherical chunk missing from its side, as if a giant had used a cookie cutter to remove a piece of it. There were no scorch marks, no signs of an explosion, just a clean, surgical absence. The silence was the most terrifying part. It was a perfect, profound void of sound. No wind whistling through the canyons of the city, no distant hum of machinery, no birds, no voices. The silence was so absolute it felt like a pressure against his eardrums, a ringing nothingness that was more deafening than any explosion. He had arrived in a graveyard. The graveyard of a reality. By the old man. Kurama whispered, his usual bravado completely gone, replaced by a primal awe and horror. This isn't destruction. This is deletion. Naruto got to his feet. He could feel the last vestiges of life in this dying world, a handful of flickering embers in a city of trillions. They were fading fast. He started to run, his footsteps making no sound on the strange, ash-like ground. He had to find someone. He had to get an answer. He sprinted through the silent, dissolving streets, the horrifying spectacle of erasure all around him. A park on his left vanished, trees and benches winking out of existence. The reflection in a building's glass facade suddenly showed only the black void of the sky, even though the building behind him was still there. Causality itself was breaking down. He followed the strongest of the fading life signatures, his sage senses now honed to a terrifying degree. It led him to a vast, open plaza in the heart of the city, dominated by a grand municipal building, its dome half erased. In the center of the plaza stood a single figure, leaning heavily on a spear that was crackling with faint, white lightning. He was a tall man, clad in the tattered remains of what looked like a high-tech combat uniform, a cross between samurai armor and tactical gear. His face was grim, etched with lines of exhaustion. His spiky, silver hair was unmistakable, though it was matted with grime. But it was his eyes that held Naruto's attention. One was a sharp, intelligent black. The other was an empty, scarred socket, a testament to a battle lost long ago. It was Kakashi Hatake. Not his Kakashi, but a version of him, harder, older, and carrying the weight of a world on his shoulders. As Naruto approached, the man raised his spear, what little energy he had left crackling at its tip. Another one? The man rasped, his voice rough from disuse. Come to pick over the bones, there's nothing left to take. I'm not here to take anything, Naruto said, his own voice sounding shockingly loud in the oppressive silence. I'm here to help. The alternate Kakashi gave a bitter, hollow laugh. Help? Look around you. You're about 6 hours too late for help. 6 hours ago, this was a city of 40 million souls. Now, it's just me, and I won't be here much longer. As he spoke, Naruto saw it. The man's left hand was flickering, becoming translucent, the background visible through his armored glove. His existence was being unmade. What did this? Naruto demanded, stepping closer. What attacked you? Attacked? The man's laugh was even more bitter this time. That's not the right word. An attack is something you can fight. You can't fight a sunset. You can't punch a tide. This wasn't an attack. It was a presence. He straightened up, his one good eye boring into Naruto. I am Commander Hatake, last acting leader of the United Shinobi Alliance of this world. We were a world of peace, built on logic and science. We had conquered disease. We had begun to explore our star system. We were arrogant. We thought we were the masters of our own reality. His gaze drifted to the holes in the sky. Then it arrived. There was no ship, no portal. The sky just broke. We felt it before we saw it. A psychic pressure. A feeling of utter insignificance. We called it the god of nothingness. The sages of our world named it the Oblivion. He looked back at Naruto, his flickering form becoming more pronounced. It didn't speak. It didn't issue demands. It had no army. It simply was. And its presence began to unmake us. It didn't destroy. It erased. People, buildings, memories. I watched my entire command staff vanish from a room, not dead, just gone. As if they had never existed at all. Their files, their family photos, all blank. We fired our most powerful weapons at it, weapons that could crack continents. They passed right through the void it created, as if it wasn't there. This was it. The confirmation. The source of the great unraveling. A being so powerful, so alien, that its mere existence was a negation of others. We fought, Commander Hatake said, a flicker of his world's will of fire showing in his eye. We tried to create energy shields, to reinforce the fabric of our reality with our own chakra. It was like trying to patch a hole in a starship with paper. The nothing just consumed it all. I can feel it, Naruto said, his voice low. This power, your world is being unmade. And me with it, Hatake stated, his voice devoid of fear, only a profound weariness. He looked down at his spear, the lightning crackling around it finally sputtering out. I am the last one. I suppose my chakra signature was strong enough, my will stubborn enough, to resist the erasure for a time. A final, meaningless act of defiance. He looked at Naruto, a real question in his eye for the first time. Who are you? Your energy. It's like a sun in this dying world. You are not from here. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, he said. And where I'm from. I'm supposed to be the one who stops this. The commander stared at him, and for a moment, a flicker of something that might have been hope, or perhaps just grim satisfaction, crossed his face. So the message will get out. Good, he coughed, and his form flickered violently, his legs becoming almost completely transparent. Then know this, Naruto Uzumaki. This oblivion, it is not mindless hunger. We felt an intelligence, a cold, detached purpose. Like a gardener weeding a patch of ground. It sees other realities not as life, but as errors. Flaws to be corrected. It's not destroying. It believes it is cleaning. The concept was even more horrifying than mindless destruction. It implied a will, a philosophy behind the genocide. Now, Naruto's core instinct, the one that had defined his entire life, took over. He couldn't save this world. But maybe he could save this one man. Hold on, Naruto said, stepping forward and placing his hands on the commander's shoulders. He channeled his own power, the vast, new energy gifted to him by Hagoromo. It was the energy of creation, of life itself. A brilliant, golden aura erupted around him, pushing back the oppressive silence and gloom. He poured it into the flickering form of Commander Hatake, a torrent of pure life force meant to reinforce his existence, to solidify his fading atoms. What are you doing? Hatake gasped, his eye wide as he felt the incredible power flow into him. I'm a stubborn idiot. Naruto grunted, the effort immense. I don't know when to quit. He pushed more and more of his energy into the man, trying to anchor him to existence. And for a heart-stopping moment, it seemed to work. The commander's form solidified. The flickering stopped, color returned to his face. But then, the world fought back. Or rather, the unworld. The nothingness, the life force Naruto poured into Hatake didn't heal him. It was simply consumed. It was like pouring water into a bottomless pit. The golden energy flowed into the commander, and then it flowed out of him, drawn into the encroaching void, leaving nothing behind. The more power Naruto used, the faster it was drained away. He wasn't reinforcing the commander's existence. He was just feeding the erasure. The void was hungry, and he was offering it a feast. He felt the commander's hand on his own. Stop, Hatake said, his voice surprisingly gentle. It's no use. You're just wasting your strength. Naruto pulled back, panting, the golden light receding. He looked at his hands. He, Naruto Uzumaki, wielder of Sage Mode, master of the Nine Tails, heir to the Sage of Six Paths, was completely and utterly powerless. He could level mountains, calm tailed beasts, and create thousands of clones. But he could not save one man from being deleted. The world around them was now dissolving at a terrifying rate. The last buildings were crumbling into non-existence. The ground beneath their feet was fraying at the edges of the plaza, the black void creeping steadily inward. Soon, there would be nothing left but this small island of reality. Commander Hatake looked at him, a final, weary but grateful smile on his face. So, there are other worlds. Other Kakashis. That's good to know. He looked at the encroaching nothingness without fear. Don't let your world end like this, Naruto Uzumaki. Don't let our story, our echo, be for nothing. His form began to dissolve rapidly, his legs vanishing, then his torso. Thank you, for not letting me die alone. Those were his last words. His face, his silver hair, his one good eye holding Naruto's gaze to the very end, dissolved into a fine mist of gray particles that then winked out of existence, leaving absolute nothing in their place. Naruto stood alone in the center of the void. The plaza, the city, the world, it was all gone. He was floating in an infinite blackness, the last vestiges of a dead reality. He had failed. Utterly. He had watched a world die, had spoken to its last survivor, and had been unable to do anything but bear witness. The raw, undiluted horror of it all washed over him, and he screamed. It was a scream of rage, of grief, of terrifying impotence. A sound that had no air to travel through, a purely psychic roar of a new god realizing the true scale of his enemy and his own limitations. With a final, desperate act of will, he tore open another rift and threw himself through it, fleeing the silent, suffocating grave of a universe. He crashed back into his office, landing hard on the floor amidst the mess of his overturned chair and scattered papers. The sounds of Konoha rushed in to fill the void, the distant chatter of the marketplace, the chirping of birds, the hum of life. He gasped, sucking in the familiar, pine-scented air as if he had been holding his breath for an eternity. Shikamaru burst into the room, his face a mask of alarm. Naruto! What was that noise? I heard a crash and... He stopped short, taking in the scene. The Hokage on the floor, panting like he'd just run 100 miles, his face pale and covered in a cold sweat, his eyes wide with a horror Shikamaru had not seen since the darkest days of the war. Naruto, what in the world happened? Naruto slowly pushed himself up, leaning against his desk. He looked at his friend, his anchor to this world, this precious, vibrant, living reality. He had seen the alternative. He had stood in the quiet graveyard where a world used to be. The trauma of what he just experienced was a physical weight, threatening to shatter his mind. But beneath it, a new foundation was being laid. The horror was calcifying into something cold, hard, and absolute. He was no longer just a reluctant guardian burdened by a duty he never asked for. He had a face for his enemy now, not a face of flesh and blood, but a face of perfect, empty blackness. He had a name for it, the Oblivion. Shikamaru, Naruto said, his voice raspy and low, but devoid of the panic from before. It was chillingly calm. Cancel my appointments for the rest of the day. For the rest of the week. He looked past his friend, his gaze fixed on something unseen, a goal that now eclipsed everything else. The shock was fading, replaced by the cold, clear certainty of a predator who has found the scent of his prey. I have research to do. The days that followed Naruto's horrifying excursion into the dying world were a blur of feigned normalcy and clandestine obsession. To the village, he was the Hokage, perhaps a bit more withdrawn and somber than usual, a change most attributed to the immense pressures of his office. He delegated more than he ever had, trusting Shikamaru, Sakura, and Sai to handle the day-to-day governance of Konoha. He still made time for his family, but there was a new distance in his eyes, a partition in his soul that even Hinata's gentle love could not fully breach. He would sit at the dinner table, smiling at Himawari's crayon drawings and listening to Boruto's complaints about his latest mission, but a part of his vast consciousness was always elsewhere. It was scanning the endless web of realities, feeling for the faintest tremor of the unraveling, his senses poised like a sentinel's on a fortress wall, waiting for the enemy to show itself again. The psychic death scream of the world he had failed to save was a permanent scar on his memory, a constant, goading reminder of his impotence. He could not fight what he did not understand. Commander Hataki's final words echoed in his mind, "It's not destroying. It believes it is cleaning." This was not a mindless beast. It was an intelligence, an entity with a purpose, however alien and monstrous. And its name was the Oblivion. Naruto knew his own world's history was a dead end. The libraries of Konoha, the ancient scrolls of the Uzumaki clan he'd recovered, the combined knowledge of the 5 great nations, they were all laughably provincial in the face of a multiversal threat. His enemy was not of this world, or any world like it. It was tied to the very beings who traversed the dimensions as a matter of course. It was tied to the Otsutsuki. Hagoromo had gifted him not just power, but a connection. A key. He was a descendant of the sage, a reincarnation of Azura, and he held within him the chakra of all 9-tailed beasts, fragments of the 10 tails, which was itself born of Kagaya Otsutsuki. He was a latticework of Otsutsuki influence. He reasoned that if this enemy was a god of nothingness, it likely had its origins in the only race he knew of that sought a twisted form of godhood. His nights were no longer for sleep. While a shadow clone fulfilled his duties as a husband and lay beside Hinata, the real Naruto sat in the silence of his study, or in the deep catacombs beneath the Hokage residence. He would meditate, not for peace, but for knowledge. He pushed his consciousness outward, not into the multiverse at large, but inward, following the threads of Otsutsuki chakra woven into his very soul. It was like following a river upstream to its source. He pushed past the familiar warmth of his own Uzumaki and Senju lineage, past the bright, determined energy of Azura, and deeper still, into the cold, alien core of Hagoromo's and Kagaya's power. It felt like diving into a deep, cold ocean. The pressure was immense. The chakra was ancient, strange, and fundamentally different from the life energy of his world. For days, he met only resistance, a psychic wall of alien pride and paranoia. The Otsutsuki, he sensed, were not a people who shared their secrets willingly. But Naruto was nothing if not persistent. He didn't try to break the wall down. He simply applied pressure, a constant, unwavering presence. He wasn't asking for permission. He was a sage now, Hagoromo's successor. He was asserting his right to know. Finally, after a week of relentless effort, something gave. It wasn't a door opening, but a resonance, a harmonic frequency he finally matched. A single, ancient Otsutsuki symbol, a complex pattern of interlocking rings and lines, bloomed in his mind's eye. It was a coordinate. A key. A destination. He didn't hesitate. Secluding himself in the most secure, chakra-proof chamber beneath his office, he focused on the symbol. He poured his will into it, using it as a navigational beacon. As he had in his office when he traveled to the dying world, he tore a hole in reality. This time, however, it was different. It wasn't a raw, chaotic wound. Guided by the Otsutsuki key, the rift he opened was a clean, perfect circle, a swirling gateway of pearlescent light that hummed with a low, resonant frequency. It was stable. It was an invitation. Taking a deep breath, he stepped through. The transition was instantaneous and seamless. One moment he was in the stone bunker beneath Konoha, the next he was standing in a place that defied all logic and natural law. He was in a pocket dimension of impossible scale. The ground beneath his feet was a smooth, milky white surface that stretched to an unseen horizon, glowing with a soft, internal light. Above him, there was no sky, no sun, no stars. Instead, the void was filled with immense, crystalline structures that floated in silent, perfect orbits. They looked like colossal, multifaceted diamonds and quartz formations, some the size of mountains, others as large as moons. They drifted through the non-space in slow, deliberate patterns, their facets catching and refracting the soft light from below, casting slow-moving rainbows across the landscape. The air was perfectly still, silent, and held at a neutral temperature. There was no wind, no weather, no life. It was a place of profound, sterile order. It felt less like a world and more like a vault, or a library. What is this place? Kurama's voice was a low murmur, his usual bluster replaced by a sense of awe. The energy here, it's ancient. Unimaginably old. Naruto shared the fox's awe. He could feel the raw power that held this dimension together. It was Otsutsuki craftsmanship on a scale he had never imagined. This place made Kagaya's lava and ice dimensions look like children's sandcastles. He started walking, his footsteps making no sound on the glowing surface. As he moved, the crystalline structures above shifted in response to his presence, their orbits subtly altering as if to observe him. He felt a faint, passive psychic presence, not a person, but a system. An automated intelligence. He walked for what felt like hours, the impossible geometry of the place never changing. He was beginning to think it was just an empty monument when he saw something in the distance, a structure that was different from the floating crystals. It was a single, impossibly tall spire, black as polished obsidian, rising from the white ground and tapering to a point that seemed to pierce the very concept of a ceiling. As he drew closer, he saw that the spire was not smooth. Its surface was covered in intricate carvings, a dense tapestry of symbols and glyphs, more complex than any writing he had ever seen. He approached the base of the tower and reached out to touch it. The moment his fingers made contact with the obsidian's surface, the world exploded with information. It wasn't a vision or a voice. It was a direct, high-speed data transfer into his mind. The spire was a terminal, and his Otsutsuki-infused chakra was the key. His mind was flooded with a torrent of records, histories, and astronomical data that made his head spin. He was not just reading a history, he was experiencing it. He saw the Otsutsuki main branch, a race of celestial beings moving from planet to planet, from dimension to dimension, over the course of millions of years. He saw their process, a horrifyingly simple cycle of parasitism. They would arrive at a world teeming with life, plant a god tree, and wait for it to absorb all the planet's natural energy and genetic information, the sum total of its life and evolutionary history. Then, they would harvest the resulting chakra fruit, eat it to upgrade their own power and extend their lives, and move on, leaving a dead, empty husk of a world behind. To them, entire planets and civilizations were nothing more than consumable resources. This place, he now understood, was their archive. Their Zuihitsu, the glyphs in his mind translated it. It was a repository of the data they had collected, a silent monument to the countless worlds they had consumed. Each of the giant floating crystals above him was a data storage unit, containing the complete history and genetic code of a devoured civilization. This dimension was a library built from the bones of 1,000 dead worlds. The sheer, sociopathic arrogance of it was staggering. He pulled his hand back, gasping, his mind reeling from the cold, clinical nature of their cosmic genocide. But he hadn't found what he was looking for. He needed information on a threat to the Otsutsuki, not a record of their victims. He placed his hand back on the spire, focusing his intent, pushing his question into the terminal with the force of his will. Show me your gods. Show me your legends. Show me the ones who ascended beyond the cycle of the chakra fruit. Show me the oblivion. At first, the archive resisted. This was clearly classified information, hidden deep within the system. But Naruto's new status as the Nexus Sage, the heir to Hagoromo's will, gave him an authority that the ancient system seemed to recognize on a fundamental level. There was a deep hum from the spire, and a new channel of information opened, one that felt darker, more guarded. He was shown a new history, one of internal Otsutsuki lore. They were a race obsessed with evolution, with achieving perfect godhood, with transcending their physical forms and the laws of reality itself. Most sought to do this by consuming chakra fruit, a slow, iterative process. But there were legends of others. Otsutsuki who had sought a different path. The archive showed him images of several such beings, their names flashing in his mind like after-images: Ishiki, Mamashiki, Kinshiki, the ones he had already encountered through Sasuke's reports and the battle with Boruto. They were powerful, but still bound to the cycle. They were just higher-level parasites. He pushed deeper, searching for something more, something that had broken the cycle entirely. And then, he found it. A name. A record so old, so heavily encrypted, it was spoken of only in whispers even in this silent archive. Shirbai Otsutsuki. The image that formed in Naruto's mind was not of a warrior, but of a philosopher, a scientist. Shirbai was an ancient Otsutsuki from the clan's very origins who had become utterly obsessed with a single concept, escaping causality. He saw the laws of the universe, life and death, cause and effect, even the need to consume energy to exist, as a prison. A cage to be broken. He did not seek power to rule, he sought power to become truly, absolutely free. The archive showed Naruto a montage of Shirbai's terrifying progress. He mastered jutsu to such a degree that they were no longer jutsu, but simple acts of will. They were called shinjutsu, divine techniques. He could create phenomena out of nothing, reflect any attack without a thought, and travel between worlds without a portal. He continued to evolve, consuming countless chakra fruits, not for strength, but for the data they contained, searching for the key to ultimate transcendence. The final entry on Shirbai was both triumphant and horrifying. It described his ascension. He had finally succeeded. Through a process the archive itself could not fully comprehend, Shirbai had shed his physical body and evolved into a being of pure energy and consciousness. He had become a true god, existing outside the laws of the universe, no longer needing to eat, or breathe, or even exist in a linear timeline. The record ended with a single, reverent statement: "He has risen above all, and now resides in a higher dimension, beyond our perception." The other Otsutsuki revered him as a success, the ultimate goal of their entire race. But that wasn't the end of the story. Naruto, sensing a gap, a deliberate omission, pushed harder. His Nexus Sage energy, a power that governed the connections between realities, acted as a master key. He forced the archive to show him the forbidden records, the logs that had been sealed even from the main branch members. A new stream of data, tinged with palpable fear, flowed into him. Shirbai's ascension hadn't been an end. It was a new beginning. In his godlike state, existing everywhere and everyone at once, he continued to evolve. He had escaped the prison of causality, but he now saw it everywhere, in every universe, every timeline. He saw life, with its messy struggles, its pain, its imperfections, its constant cycle of creation and destruction, as a flaw in the cosmic code. A bug in the system. His new, divine perspective was utterly alien. He no longer saw individual lives or stories. He saw flawed drafts of existence, and with the cold, detached logic of a programmer cleaning up corrupted code, he decided to clean the slate. He had become the Oblivion. The name was something his victims had given him. He had no name for himself. He was simply the force of correction. The gardener pulling the weeds. The archive showed a terrifying, fragmented vision from the perspective of an Otsutsuki scout who had witnessed his power. It saw Shirbai, or what was left of him, a being of pure, silent hunger, manifesting in a reality. He didn't fight. He didn't speak. He simply existed, and his presence unmade the very laws that held that universe together. The final piece of the puzzle slotted into place. The weapon. The method of erasure. The Otsutsuki, in their arrogance, had built countless powerful artifacts, but Shirbai, in his ascension, had created the ultimate tool of uncreation. The archive showed him a schematic, a conceptual blueprint that made Naruto's blood run cold. It was an artifact known as the Thonian Bell. It was not a physical bell in the conventional sense. It was a resonance weapon that operated on a metaphysical level. When rung, it produced not a sound, but a wave of absolute silence, a frequency of perfect null energy. This silent song did not shatter or destroy matter. It vibrated at the exact anti-frequency of existence itself. It resonated with the bonds that held atoms together, the laws of physics, the flow of time, and simply cancelled them out. It was a jutsu that targeted the source code of a universe and pressed delete. The horror of it was absolute. This was what Commander Hataki's world had faced. Not an invasion, but a fundamental negation. Naruto felt a surge of rage so potent it made the white ground beneath him crack. He ripped his hand away from the spire, stumbling back, his mind a whirlwind of terror and fury. He had his answer. His enemy had a name, a history, and a motive. Shirbai Otsutsuki. A being who had achieved godhood only to become the ultimate nihilist, a cosmic editor erasing any story he deemed unworthy. And Naruto Uzumaki, a man who had fought his entire life to prove that every single life had value, was now his designated opposite. He knew what he had to do. Brute force wouldn't work. His failure to save Commander Hataki had proven that. Pouring energy into the void was useless. He couldn't outpower a being that had become a fundamental force of anti-existence. He couldn't fight Shirbai. He had to fight his method. He had to stop the Thonian Bell. But how? He was one man. Even with the power of a sage and the Nine Tails, he was a single being against a god. The weight of his task, the sheer impossibility of it, threatened to crush him. He looked up at the floating crystalline moons, the silent tombs of countless dead civilizations. He saw his own world reflected in their multifaceted surfaces. He saw Konoha. He saw his family. They were just another entry waiting to be added to this ghastly collection. The thought ignited a new fire in him. He wasn't alone. Not really. He was the Nexus. He had access to the entire web. If his world didn't have the tools he needed, maybe another one did. The despair was replaced by a familiar, stubborn, almost insane spark of Uzumaki creativity. If he couldn't face Shirbai alone, he wouldn't. If his world didn't have the specialists to counter a metaphysical weapon, he would find a world that did. He stood tall in the silent, sterile heart of the Otsutsuki archive, a single, warm-blooded, determined man in a mausoleum of gods. An idea began to form in his mind, a desperate, audacious, and utterly insane plan. He would not just be the shield. He would gather the pieces to build a sword. He would scour the infinite realities, not for the strongest armies, but for the most brilliant, the most unique, the most impossible individuals. He would find the anomalies, the people who, like Shirbai, had pushed the boundaries of what was possible, but had done so not out of a desire for nihilistic purity, but out of love, or grief, or a desire to protect. He was going to build a team. An impossible team, drawn from across the multiverse. With a final look of contempt at the silent, arrogant spire, Naruto focused his will. He opened a new rift, not back to his own world, but out, into the shimmering, chaotic, and beautiful tapestry of the multiverse. He had a shopping list, and the fate of all existence depended on him finding the right items. His first target was already forming in his mind, a man who wielded the same divine eyes as the Sage of Six Paths, but who had walked a different, darker, perhaps even wiser path. He was going to find a Sasuke Uchiha who had never come home. The sterile, crystalline silence of the Otsutsuki archive shattered as Naruto tore open a rift back into the vibrant chaos of the multiverse. He left the mausoleum of dead worlds behind, the cold, clinical knowledge of Shirbai and the Thonian bell burning in his mind like a brand. He was no longer just a watcher or a victim. He was a man with a mission, albeit one of staggering, near impossible scope. He couldn't fight a god of nothingness with a Rasengan. He couldn't punch a concept. His failure to save Commander Hataki's world had been a brutal but necessary lesson. Power, even his own vast, sun-like reserves, was useless when poured into a void. It was like trying to fill the ocean with a teacup. This was not a battle of attrition, it was a battle of principles, of fundamental forces. To counter a being who could erase reality, he needed specialists who could manipulate the very fabric of that reality. He stood in the in-between. The non-space he now used as a transit hub, the infinite web of shimmering universes spread before his consciousness. He was a fisherman casting his line, but he wasn't searching for the biggest fish. He was searching for the most unique, the most unlikely. He needed anomalies, individuals who had pushed their skills to a logical extreme, people who had become masters of a specific cosmic domain. He needed his own set of living, breathing shinjutsu. His first target was the most logical, and the most painful. He needed a master of space-time, someone who could perceive and manipulate dimensions on a level that even his own Sasuke could not. His friend was a peerless warrior, but his use of the Rinnegan was focused, a tool for transport and combat. Naruto needed a pure dimensionalist, a true heir to Hagoromo's visual prowess. He needed a Sasuke Uchiha who had fully dedicated his life to the Rinnegan's mysteries. He cast his intent into the web, a specific set of parameters, Sasuke Uchiha. Rinnegan. One who did not choose the path of revenge. One who did not come home. A watcher, the multiverse responded. Thousands of threads flared, worlds where Sasuke had made different choices. In many, he was dead. In others, he had succeeded Madara and plunged the world into the infinite Tsukuyumi. But one thread glowed with a unique, steady, deep purple light, the color of a master's Rinnegan. It was a quiet, somber frequency, resonating with loneliness and immense, contained power. Naruto focused his will and pulled. The world coalesced around him. He found himself standing on a windswept cliff overlooking a vast, dark ocean. The moon, full and impossibly large, hung in the sky, its silver light illuminating the churning waves below. The air was cold, and tasted of salt and solitude. This world felt older, sadder than his own. A short distance away, silhouetted against the moon, a figure sat in meditation. He wore a simple, dark gray cloak, worn and frayed from travel. His black hair was longer than Naruto remembered his own Sasuke's ever being, tied back loosely. As Naruto approached, the figure didn't turn, but his voice, a low, quiet rumble like distant thunder, filled the air. "You are not of this world," the man said. "Your chakra is a bonfire in a land of embers. It screams of a power I have not felt since I last communed with the spirit of the sage." The figure turned his head, and Naruto's breath caught in his throat. It was Sasuke, but not his Sasuke. This man's face was etched with lines of profound weariness. He looked to be in his late 40s, his features hardened not by battle, but by millennia of silent observation. His visible onyx eye held a deep, melancholic wisdom, but it was the other eye that commanded attention. There was no hair covering it. A fully matured Rinnegan, with 9 tomos swirling within its rings, stared out at the world, not with arrogance, but with a calm, all-seeing perception. This was a Rinnegan that had been used, studied, and mastered for decades. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, Naruto began, feeling strangely like a child before this ancient version of his friend. I know who you are, this Sasuke replied, his voice devoid of surprise. I have seen echoes of you in the spaces between. The beloved Hokage. The hero. A path I might have walked, had my world not broken differently. He gestured to the desolate landscape. Here, the Uchiha clan was not massacred by one, but by all. A civil war, fueled by paranoia from the village leadership, that consumed my family and many others. Itachi died trying to protect me. I was left with nothing but a legacy of hatred. He paused, his gaze turning back to the ocean. I sought power, just as your Sasuke did. I awakened the Mangekyo. I even obtained the Rinnegan after a desperate battle where your counterpart in this world, the son of the fourth Hokage, died to save me. The words were a physical blow to Naruto, but with his dying breath, he did not ask me to protect the village. He asked me to understand. To see the cycle of hatred for what it was. And so, I did not seek revenge. I sought knowledge. I left. I became a wanderer, a watcher. This Sasuke, whom Naruto would come to think of as the wanderer, had spent decades not as a warrior, but as a scholar of his Rinnegan. He hadn't just learned to open portals, he had learned to perceive dimensional stress, to reinforce the walls of reality, to create stable pocket dimensions, and to navigate the gutter space between universes. He was less of a ninja and more of a human Tenseigan, a living guardian of his world's fragile place in the cosmos. Why are you here, Naruto Uzumaki of another world? The wanderer asked, his Rinnegan seeming to peer into Naruto's very soul, seeing the Nexus Sage power humming beneath the surface. Naruto didn't waste time. He laid out the truth in its stark, terrifying entirety. Shirbai Otsutsuki. The Oblivion. The Great Unraveling. The Thonian Bell. The Erased Worlds. He spoke of his own ascension and the impossible task before him. The wanderer listened, his expression unchanging, a mask of profound calm. When Naruto finished, the ancient Uchiha was silent for a full minute, his gaze lost in the endless churning of the dark sea. A god of nothingness, he finally said, the words a quiet exhalation. I have felt its whispers at the edge of my senses for years. A growing cold. A wrongness in the void. I thought it was a natural decay of the multiverse, the eventual heat-death of existence. To know it is a will, a purpose. He closed his eyes. The arrogance of the Otsutsuki truly knows no bounds. To achieve godhood only to become its antithesis. I need your help, Naruto said, his voice pleading. I need a master of space-time. Someone who can build a shield, not of chakra, but of reality itself. Someone who can get us to a god and keep us stable long enough to act. The wanderer looked at Naruto, a flicker of something, perhaps the ghost of his own world's Naruto, in his eye. My duty is to this world. This broken, sad little world is my home. I am its silent guardian. This oblivion will not stop at one world, Naruto pressed, the psychic scream of the dying reality echoing in his memory. It will consume everything. Your world will be just another forgotten whisper. Your vigil will be for nothing. The wanderer was silent again. He had spent his life detached, observing, refusing to interfere. To act on such a grand scale was a violation of his entire philosophy. But Naruto's logic was undeniable. A shepherd cannot protect his flock if the entire pasture is about to be swallowed by a sinkhole. The Thonian Bell, the wanderer murmured. To counter a weapon that erases reality, a dimensional shield is only a temporary measure. You need more. You need someone who can affirm existence, a counter-frequency. Naruto's eyes widened. What do you mean? This Shirbai erases life. You need a master of life. Someone who can reinforce the very concept of being, heal the spiritual wounds inflicted by the bell's resonance. The wanderer's Rinnegan seemed to glow faintly. I have, in my travels, perceived such an anomaly. A reality where the horrors of war were replaced by the horrors of disease. A world where the greatest warrior was not a fighter, but a healer. He was already thinking like a member of the team. He was giving Naruto his next target. Will you help me? Naruto asked again, his heart pounding. The wanderer stood up, his tall frame cutting a stark figure against the moon. To be a watcher is meaningless if there is nothing left to watch. I will help you forge your sword, Naruto Uzumaki, but my price is the survival of my world. You must ensure it is shielded. I swear it, Naruto said, relief washing over him. The first piece was in place. With the Wanderer's guidance, Naruto cast his senses back into the web. He was no longer searching blindly. The Wanderer gave him the specific frequency of the reality he sought, a world tinged with the green light of healing, but also with the gray shadow of widespread death. Naruto tore open a new rift. Stay here. I'll be back, he told the Wanderer, before stepping through. The world he entered was eerily quiet. He stood in what was clearly Konoha, but it was a wounded, scarred version of his home. The streets were sparsely populated. Memorial stones, far more numerous than in his own village, dotted the parks and public spaces. The people he saw wore masks over their faces, not as a disguise, but as a medical precaution. A palpable aura of grief and lingering fear hung over the entire village. The Wanderer's words echoed in his mind, a world devastated by a plague. He followed the strongest life force signature, a beacon of immense, vibrant green energy. It led him, unsurprisingly, to the Konoha Hospital. The building was massive, far larger and more advanced than his own, a sprawling complex that took up a significant portion of the village. It was a testament to this world's priorities. Inside, the atmosphere was sterile and tense. Medics rushed through the halls, their faces grim. He found his way to the Central Research and Development Wing, where the energy signature was most potent. He entered a large, circular laboratory that looked more like a sacred grove. Vats of glowing green liquid lined the walls, and intricate chakra flow diagrams were projected in the air. In the center of the room, her back to him, stood a woman with vibrant pink hair. She was older than his Sakura, perhaps in her early 40s, with lines of stress and concentration etched around her eyes. She wasn't wearing a standard flak jacket, but a specialized medical coat interwoven with chakra-conducting threads. Her hands, glowing with a soft, emerald light, hovered over a petri dish containing a sample of black, corrupted-looking cells. As she worked, Naruto watched in awe. This was not the standard mystical palm technique. She was not just pushing healing chakra into the cells. She was deconstructing their corrupted life force on a fundamental level, untangling the malformed spiritual DNA, and then painstakingly reweaving it into a healthy pattern. She was not just healing, she was resurrecting the very idea of a healthy cell. I know you're there, she said, not turning around. Your chakra signature is pristine, unaffected. I haven't sensed anything like it in 20 years. Her voice was his Sakura's, but it was harder, honed by decades of fighting an enemy that couldn't be punched. She finished her delicate work, the black cells in the dish turning a healthy, vibrant pink. She placed the dish aside and finally turned to face him. Her green eyes were piercing, intelligent, and held a deep, deep sadness. You look like him, she said softly. But your eyes, they don't have the same ghosts. My name is... Naruto started. Naruto Uzumaki, she finished for him. In my world, he died 20 years ago. The first victim of the Kigan plague. His unique chakra made him a perfect incubator. It spread from him to the rest of the world before we even knew what it was. The words hit Naruto like a physical blow. A world where he was patient zero for a global pandemic. This Sakura, whom he mentally dubbed the Life Weaver, had lived through a different kind of war. A war against a chakra-devouring virus that had wiped out nearly half the world's population, shinobi and civilian alike. Faced with an enemy that adapted to every medical ninjutsu, she had been forced to evolve. She had pushed her perfect chakra control and the strength of 100 seal to their absolute limits, not for destructive power, but for creation. She hadn't just mastered healing, she had become a master of life force itself. She could heal a person's spiritual essence, mend a broken bloodline limit, and, as she had just demonstrated, rewrite the very definition of a living cell. Naruto once again explained his mission, his voice heavy with the knowledge of her world's tragedy. He told her about the Oblivion, a plague upon reality itself, and the Thonian Bell, its instrument of infection. The Life Weaver listened, her expression shifting from weary sadness to sharp, clinical focus. She walked over to a large, projected map of a human chakra network. A weapon that erases existence by resonating with it. She mused, her fingers tracing the intricate pathways. It's like the Keegan plague on a cosmic scale. A virus that doesn't just kill the host, but deletes the host's genetic code from the world. She looked at him, her green eyes blazing with a fierce, intellectual fire. You're saying this? Shirbai is trying to cure reality of the disease of life. That's what it seems like, Naruto admitted. Then you don't just need a shield, she stated, echoing the Wanderer's sentiment. You need an antibiotic. A counter-resonance. Something that can be introduced into a reality to reinforce its spiritual immune system, making it resistant to the bell's frequency. She tapped her own forehead, where her strength of 100 seal was visible. My research, it has led me to understand the fundamental vibration of life force. It might be possible to create a wave of pro-life energy, to inoculate a reality against erasure. She was already solving the problem. Her mind was a razor, dissecting the metaphysical threat as if it were a new strain of virus. Will you help? Naruto asked, his voice filled with hope. The Life Weaver looked around her quiet, sterile laboratory, a monument to a lifetime of loss. I have spent my entire life saving a world that was already half dead. My Naruto. He died believing in a future he never got to see. The idea of a threat that wants to erase all futures everywhere. It's the ultimate disease. A tear traced a path down her cheek, the first sign of emotion she had truly shown. To stop that? To ensure that no one else has to live in a world of ghosts? She wiped the tear away, her expression hardening with resolve. Yes. I will help. For him. And for everyone else. 2 pieces. A master of space-time and a master of life force. But the Wanderer had been right. A shield and an antibiotic were not enough. They needed a way to control the battlefield, to manipulate the very flow of the confrontation. They needed a way to buy time against a being who existed outside of it. There is one more, Naruto said, his mind already reaching for the next thread. An enemy that operates outside of normal causality requires a paradox. The Life Weaver nodded in understanding. Someone who can bend the rules of cause and effect. Naruto returned to the Wanderer, bringing the Life Weaver with him. The meeting on the desolate cliffside was a strange, somber affair. 3 beings from 3 broken worlds, united by a single, impossible purpose. The Wanderer, with his all-seeing eye, and the Life Weaver, with her profound understanding of life, immediately grasped the final piece they needed. Naruto cast his senses out one last time. This search was the most abstract. Itachi Uchiha. Survivor. One who mastered the Mangekyo not for destruction, but for philosophy. One who understands the space between moments. The thread that responded was faint, almost illusory. It flickered in and out of perception, a quantum anomaly in the multiversal web. Grasping it was like trying to catch smoke. Naruto had to use the combined focus of his new allies to lock onto it. The Wanderer helped him pinpoint its dimensional coordinates, while the Life Weaver helped him stabilize the fluctuating life signature. He tore open the final rift and stepped through alone. This reality was the strangest yet. It was not a place, but a state. He stood in a featureless gray void, a silent, motionless world that felt like a photograph of a forgotten moment. There was no ground, no sky, only an endless, monochrome fog. You have come far to find a man who is nowhere, a voice echoed from all directions at once. The voice was calm, measured, and achingly familiar. A figure coalesced from the gray mist before him. Itachi Uchiha. He looked exactly as Naruto remembered him from the brief time he had been reanimated during the war, but his presence was utterly different. He wasn't a ghost, nor was he truly solid. He seemed to flicker at the edge of vision, as if he was both there and not there simultaneously. A murder of crows, made of the same gray mist, swirled around him before dissolving back into the fog. His Mangekyo Sharingan were active, but they were not the spinning blades of violence Naruto remembered. They were calm, steady, like deep, black pools that reflected the nothingness around them. Where are we? Naruto asked, his own senses struggling to get a foothold in this paradoxical realm. We are in the now that is always, Itachi replied, his voice a calm river in the sea of gray. A moment between seconds. A pause between cause and effect. It is the place I created for myself when my brother's love and the village's hatred became a contradiction I could no longer resolve. This Itachi, Naruto realized, had survived his fated battle with his younger brother. But racked with disease and the guilt of his actions, he had not returned to the village. Instead, he had turned inward, using his brilliant mind and the power of his Mangekyo to explore not the world, but the nature of time and perception itself. He had mastered his Sharingan to a degree that was purely philosophical. He had found a loophole in reality, a place outside the river of time where he could exist indefinitely, a living paradox observing the world without being part of it. He was a master of Izanami and Izanagi, not as combat jutsus, but as tools to perceive and manipulate causality on a microscale. I am a ghost who chose not to die, this Itachi, the paradox, explained. I exist in the gap, observing the flow of what was and what will be. And I have seen you coming for a long, long time, Nexus Sage. He already knew. Of course he knew. A being who exists outside of time would have already witnessed this conversation. Sure, Otsutsuki seeks to impose a final, absolute order on existence by creating a final, absolute end, the paradox said, his Mangekyo seeming to see the entire conflict laid out like a shogi board. He is the ultimate expression of cause leading to effect. The cause is life's imperfection, the effect is erasure. He glided closer, his form insubstantial. To fight him, you cannot simply meet his force. You must disrupt his logic. You must introduce a variable that his divine equation cannot account for. You need to control the flow of the battle itself. You need to create moments where there should be none. You need to trap a god in a second, and stretch that second into an eternity. He was offering his abilities. He was offering to turn his personal, philosophical prison into a weapon. Why would you help? Naruto asked, still trying to wrap his mind around the man before him. In my self-imposed exile, I have contemplated every possible outcome of my life, the paradox stated, a hint of sadness in his timeless voice. The only conclusion I have ever reached is that the future, in all its chaotic, unpredictable, and imperfect forms, is worth preserving. My brother Sasuke deserves a world in which to find his own answers, a world Shirbai would erase as a flawed draft. My choice, therefore, is not a choice at all. It is the only logical move left on the board. With a nod, he allowed his form to become solid, a conscious decision to re-enter the flow of time. I will be your strategist. I will be your clock. Naruto returned to the Wanderer, and the Life Weaver with the final piece of his impossible team. He opened a portal to a neutral ground he knew well, the stark, white, high-gravity dimension where he and his Sasuke had fought and sealed Kagaya. It was a blank slate, a fitting place to plan the salvation of all realities. The three fragments of broken worlds stood before him. The Wanderer, Sasuke Uchiha, master of space and dimension, his Rinnegan seeing the cosmic battlefield. The Life Weaver, Sakura Haruno, master of life force, her hands holding the power to affirm existence against the void. The Paradox, Itachi Uchiha, master of time and causality, his Sharingan able to bend the very rules of the fight. And at their center stood Naruto Uzumaki, the Nexus Sage, the source of power and the indomitable will that bound them all together. They were a team forged from grief, loss, and impossible skill. They were the multiverse's answer to a god of nothingness. They were the only hope. He's aware of us now, the Wanderer said, his gaze fixed on the empty horizon. I can feel his attention beginning to turn. The gardener has noticed the weeds are fighting back. Let him come, Naruto said, his voice ringing with a power that was no longer just his own, but a chorus of four worlds. We'll be ready.